Hi guys, Jamie from Boxing Life, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm joined with another Jamie from Punch Perfect Boxing. How's it going, Jamie? You good?
Yeah, all good. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on. Excited to join you.
Awesome, that's great. Yeah, so I'm going to be splitting this video into two parts. So part one, we're just going to be talking about some of the bigger British fight nights that are going to be happening in December. And to start off, it is I think it's what's the date? It's the 4th of December, and it's Arthur versus Yarde. So personally, this is a fight I'm really looking forward to. The first fight was, I think, Arthur pretty much dominated just with the jab. Obviously, there was talk about him having a bit of a shoulder injury or something like that with his right arm. That's why I wasn't throwing the right in that fight. But he did very well. He boxed him beautifully throughout the whole fight, and yeah, he definitely deserved to win. I don't know, how did you think the first fight went between the two of them?
Yeah, I thought Arthur won it pretty comfortably as well. And like you
Yeah,
say, pretty comfortably with one hand, basically. I can't remember, like you say, whether it's the shoulder or the right hand
yeah,
that was the problem. But it kind of, I don't know if you remember on the night, it sort of came out in the changing room that his right hand was damaged. So then going
yeah,
into the fight, we sort of were waiting to see whether that was true or not. And you could tell by the way he was using the jab. But there seems to be this thing with Yarde that no matter how badly he can be dominated and how out of his depth he can look, he only needs a second to really turn things around in the 12th round, got on
yeah.
top
That's
of
true.
Arthur, and with more time might have been able to pull it off. So, yeah, I thought Arthur won the first one well enough and potentially well enough as well for there not to be a rematch.
Mhm.
When it was actually rumoured, I kind of thought, well, it's not a fight I'm gagging to see, but once it settles down and you realise it is happening, you've got to then start to try and build some enthusiasm for it. So interesting because Yarde can just have his moments.
Yeah, that's true. I think he's obviously a very explosive puncher. I think he's kind of modeled his style off that kind of Philly shell, kind of Mayweather look, but I think he's quite, I don't know, for me it's quite a confusing fighter because obviously he wants to be this kind of knockout artist kind of guy, but at the same time he's wanting to use this defensive movement, and I think he's kind of like stuck between what he should do. So I'm interested to see if he's worked on some improvements in terms of just cutting off the ring a bit better and trapping Yarde a bit, because I feel like Yarde was just able to circle around him too easily in that fight and just stick out the jab really. But then you have to give credit to Arthur. I think he's got a really good jab overall. He's just he just continually just flicks it out throughout the whole fight, and yeah, it's a difficult one to see. But for me personally, I think if the right hand's okay, I think he'll be even more dangerous going into this second fight. And I think he might as well go into the fight with the same tactics of just trying to use the jab. And obviously, if you can use that right hand a bit more, you just never know what could happen. I think for me personally, I think Arthur will definitely, I think he'll win this fight again. Just box Yarde, keep him at distance, and if he can catch him with that right hand, maybe a couple of times throughout, I could maybe not knock him out, but I could definitely see Yarde a bit buzzed, and it would just kind of go along the same lines as the first fight. How do you think the second fight will go along, Jamie?
Yeah, I think similar to what you just said, to be honest. I think with Yarde, there's a big discrepancy in fundamentals, really. We saw
Yeah.
that in the Kovalev fight, that just the simple things, the jab, the 1-2, the reverse 1-2, little things like that really trouble Yarde. And that's one of the things that Arthur does so well. Like you say, he's very left-hand dominant a little bit, a bit like
Hmm.
Caleb Plant. He relies a little bit too much on his
Yeah.
left hand sometimes. When his right hand was damaged, kind of, if it had been the other way around, if it had been his left hand damaged, it would have been
Yeah.
complete
Oh, yeah.
chaos and it would have been over for him. But he can get by because he's got such a good jab. I think when there is just such a discrepancy and the way the first fight went, I think you kind of have to back Arthur going into this one. But like we say with Yarde, he does have a rawness to him. He is the better athlete overall, so
Mhm.
he can just have these moments. The thing that's let him down at times as well is, obviously a lot has been said about it, but his corner team, I don't think he gets the best advice in those
Yeah.
situations. Where in the Arthur fight, we spoke about, like, he needs to cut down the ring a bit more. He needs to kind of get in those situations by jabbing and bringing himself in closer.
Hmm.
He doesn't feel the need to do that when your corner's telling you you're winning the fight when you're not. So the urgency is not quite there. And even in the Kovalev fight, there's too much urgency where he's telling him to just go all out and blow the gasket out there. So I just think that Arthur's got a bit of a better trainer. He's got better fundamentals. And I'm going to take him again on a points decision. But I do think that you can never really rule out Yarde just because he does have his moments. And if he's a bit more composed and perhaps sets the tone a little bit earlier, perhaps he has his moments. But I just think based on what we've seen, you've got to go for Arthur.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting fight. I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually just, I'm a really, like I said, I'm a really big fan of Arthur just because of that, the way he uses the jab. So, but you never know, Yarde could definitely approach it differently in this fight. So it'll be an interesting fight.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So next up, we've got, well, it's 2 fight nights on the 11th of December. And we've got Eubank and Williams and Benn, Algieri. So I guess the majority, I don't know which one you're going to watch, Jamie, but I think from what I've kind of seen, it's Eubank Williams. People will probably watch over the other one. So we'll start off with that. How do you see that fight going?
So I've got some thoughts on it. I think it's a really interesting fight. And first and foremost, one, I'm glad it's happening because I think Eubank puts himself on a bit of a pedestal sometimes. And without having proved it, he kind of ignores the likes of Williams, etc., and wants to jump in at the deep end and puts himself on a pedestal, like I said. So him coming down, going to Cardiff, I really like that. And second of all, they spoke about it being pay-per-view. And I do feel like if they'd have made it on pay-per-view, it would have skewed what the matchup is because it's a really good fight, first and foremost. So I'm glad they've pushed that to the side and we can just focus on the fight. Going into it, I think there are so many possibilities. And the reason being is you've got 2 conflicted fighters, in my opinion. You've got Chris Eubank, who obviously doesn't have the pedigree, and coming into the professional game, he had a rawness and just the athleticism to him, similar to Anthony Yarde actually, but a bit of a more durable athlete.
Yeah.
And he kind of, even in the fights where he was totally outclassed in Groves and Saunders, especially Saunders, he was still in the fight just because he had this edge to him, and his kind of rawness was enough to make him competitive. And I feel like getting with Roy Jones, you'd imagine that that would make him a better fighter, but I actually think he's kind of caught between having his rawness and now he's been a bit more polished, and he hasn't necessarily got the pedigree and the assets to apply what Roy Jones has given him. So he looks a bit conflicted. And then I feel like with Liam Williams, it's sort of the same thing, because when he lost to Liam Smith and then linked up with Dominic Ingle, I watched his fight against Mark Heffron in Manchester. I was actually there. It was Frampton Warrington undercard, I believe. And he was excellent that night. He looked like he'd implemented everything Ingle had taught him. And then his subsequent fights after that, he did really look like an improved fighter. He was, he was switching more. He looked like a little bit more fluid. He looked a bit more spiteful. And there was all these improvements. And then he jumped in at the deep end against Andrade and just neglected it all.
Yeah.
Went in there and just went back to the old Liam Williams. And that's sort of a sign for me that if he's not comfortable in there, he'll always kind of revert to type. So for me, you've got 2 fighters in there where you don't really know what you're going to get. Are you going to get the kind of raw Williams and the raw Eubank, which I think favours Eubank, or are you going to get the more polished version of the 2, which I think favours Williams? So it's an interesting clash. I do slightly lean towards Eubank. I think he's just a little bit bigger. I think he's a bit more durable as well with his chin. I feel like he is what Boxer and Sky view as their pay-per-view star now that Eddie Hearn's taken his crop away. So I feel like he'll just have the edge going into this one, but really looking forward to it. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, no, I think that should be a good fight. I think for me, I was going to actually ask you about that whole Roy Jones, him training him now. And like, it's a weird one because I feel in that last fight Eubank had, I know the guy came out as a southpaw and they were training and all that. And obviously that's going to, confuse matters a little bit when you're in the ring. But I feel like you're saying he's kind of like Eubank's in a kind of weird place where before he used that kind of, come forward, uses that athleticism to try and just take guys out of there. And now, he's got Roy Jones, and Roy Jones is clearly that kind of guy that's going to teach him to think more defensively. And I just feel like for me, that's just not Eubank Jr. in my opinion. I think he's probably best, when he's kind of coming forward. And I'm not really sure about that matchup, if I'm being honest. And for Williams, I think he's a really good pressure fighter. Like you said, in those previous fights, on before that Andrade fight, he was looking really good. I have to admit, you know, he cuts off the ring really well. Does obviously get caught a few times, but like you said, he kind of reverted back against Andrade. But saying that, he did have some good moments in that fight against Andrade. I think he caught him. Andrade was definitely buzzed a few times. So yeah, for me, I'm not really too sure who's going to win it. I think, like you're saying, I think if Williams can just apply that game plan properly, you know, he might be able to just put enough pressure on Eubank to make him, you know, turn into his game plan. And yeah, I can see I'm just maybe slightly edging Williams, and I know that's probably not the favorable one, but I just think he because of Eubank just kind of changing his style in that sense. That's the only reason why I'm kind of maybe slightly favoring Williams, but you never know. Eubank could just come out and just one punch because he is that kind of guy. You know, he's able to do it. So yeah, so it'll be a really good fight. And then the other fight we've got on the same night, we've got Benn Algieri, and yeah, I think, you know, obviously Benn's still an up and coming fighter, and it feels like he's been around for ages. I think I was there for his first ever fight in the Hydro. I can't even remember who it was. It was some Irish guy. I think he was fighting when he was 19 years old. So I've kind of followed him quite closely, and I think he has improved. He's been in some wars as well, and I think I've watched some of your videos, Jamie, and you've just said, you know, Eddie Hearn's definitely just still, you know, picking the right fights for him. And I guess, do you think Algieri is just another step up in the right direction?
Yeah, I feel like Eddie Hearn, my main criticism always of Eddie Hearn has always been his matchmaking. I feel like it's too easy and then it's a massive jump. But I feel like I always give him massive credit for how he's been bringing Conor Benn along, because it's been small steps forward, but he's always identified someone with either a name or the right opposition. I said when he made Formella, it was pretty much a masterstroke, because it was a fight that really and truly Benn couldn't lose because Formella didn't hit hard enough. And, you know, coming off, you know, going 12 rounds with Porter, he's durable. So I felt like it was the perfect fight. Obviously, Vargas, then he looked spectacular in that. Then going on to Granados. And I feel like Algieri is kind of the next small step forward. And I think it will continue to be that. And one day we might see an opportunity with Conor Benn where Hearn just throws him in. And I think it might be the right time. I think he'll identify an opportunity where it's, you know, maybe one of the aging elite guys has slowed down a lot and he's able to jump in there and capitalize on that. But I really like how he's bringing on Conor Benn. I think he's doing a good job with it. And there is no rush, because that welterweight division, I mean, the top end we all know about with Spence, Crawford, Boots, Ortiz, Ugas, we know about that. But outside of that, there is 10 to 15 other guys that are also very, very good that I don't think Conor Benn beats just yet. So there is a long way to go. And I feel like people shouldn't get too excited. And some people are saying to me, what about a Danny Garcia or someone like that? That's a massive jump. I don't think they should be looking at that. Even Avanesian's a big jump right now. And I'm glad Hearn's kind of identifying that. So I like what he's doing. Ultimately, Algieri has the slightly better fundamentals. He's more experienced, been at a higher level. But ultimately, he doesn't hit hard enough to trouble Conor Benn. And I think Conor Benn will be able to have the advantage there, which will be enough. And one of the things Algieri has really struggled with in the past is speed. And I think Conor Benn is pretty quick. So I think he'll be able to take a points decision. I think it'll be a competitive, but kind of everyone knows who won it.
Yeah, I think Algieri, like he's definitely a tough guy. He's obviously got the experience being in with some top guys, but he's kind of being out of the ring as well. So I think just the activity of Benn will definitely favour him going into this fight. But I wouldn't be surprised if Algieri gives a bit of a war going into this. He is actually, as much as Algieri, you hear him talk, he is quite like articulate guy. But when he's in the ring, he does go to war, and I quite like that about him. So no, I think that will be a good fight. Definitely, I'll probably watch the Eubank Williams over it, but knowing that probably the Benn Algieri fight will be a better fight in the end or something. But yeah, so we'll see what happens. And then I think we've also got Katie Taylor fighting that night too. Huge fan of her. I think she's just a brilliant boxer overall, just tremendous. skills and technique. And she's facing, I think it's a Kazakh, what's she called, Sharipova or something like that.
Sharipova, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really know too much about her, but I don't know. Do you know much about her, Jamie? Or
I know a little bit. Obviously,
yeah,
a good amateur. Hasn't set
yeah,
it alight necessarily in the
yeah,
pro game, but that's pretty much all there is to know. This is a big step up for her as well.
yeah. So hopefully maybe that sets up the Serrano fight or something in the future. So yeah, we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
And then the last kind of big British fight night, we've got Parker Chisora. So in terms of like the main event, I'm actually more excited about a fight in the undercard, but I know Boatsi and oh sorry, what's his name again? The Russian Bazov. Is he Russian?
Yeah, Russian.
Yeah. That's obviously off now because of Boatsi getting an injury, but I'm actually really looking forward to the Gongora and Richards fight. I think that's
me too.
That is the fight I'm looking forward to more than the main card. And then we've also got Lee McGregor, the Scottish bantam, not bantamweight. Is he a bantamweight?
Yeah, bantamweight.
Bantamweight. Yeah, I was getting. It's always like super bantamweight. Yeah, so he's bantamweight, and he's obviously signed with Matchroom, so he'll be making his debut on DAZN for them. And I'm looking forward to see how he gets on. But I guess we'll just talk about Parker Chisora first. It's kind of a weird. It's just kind of. It feels a bit of a filler heavyweight fight. You're gonna. Chisora, you're going to get what you get with Chisora. He's going to come forward. He's going to try and knock Parker out. Parker, will no doubt have a statement. You'll have to make a statement going into this fight, I feel. He's kind of been a little bit forgotten about. He obviously trains with Tyson Fury now and stuff. And I just don't really know, where his career is going ever since his defeat to Joshua. So don't know, Jamie, what do you think about that? Do you think... do you think Parker wins it pretty easy, or do you think it'll be another close fight?
I think it will be another close fight, to be honest. The first one, I mean, I see very mixed reviews on the first one. There's some people that loved it, are happy with a rematch. There's some people that really couldn't care less. I was sort of, I kind of boycotted the first fight really because I didn't think it was good enough to be a pay-per-view headline. And I felt like Katie Taylor and Natasha Jonas should have headlined over them because that fight was, two elite professionals and good advocates of the sport that I think should have been above them, and Bivol being low down on that card underneath Campbell Hatton. So I boycotted the first fight really, but I did end up watching it a couple of days later. I felt like Joseph Parker got the nod, and I gave it that as well. They're two heavyweights that I find quite frustrating to watch. I find Derek Chisora has this kind of War Chisora thing to him, and don't get me wrong, he's had some good fights, he's had some big knockouts. But more often than not with Chisora, it's 3 or 4 rounds of non-stop pressure and big overhand rights and left. And then it's more often than not 7 or 8 rounds of laying on your chest, plodding forward, being out of breath. And I don't think it's necessarily as exciting as people make out. And then with Joseph Parker, he's equally frustrating where there's just no killer instinct or extra gear with him. There's times in fights where he can really turn it up a notch and he just doesn't do it. The Junior Farr fight, I can't remember if that was earlier this year or last year, but that was like, it was painful to watch at times because it's like, you almost want to spam a button for him to throw the punch like you're on a video game or something, because it's just, he's too tentative at times. But I will say that I thought Parker boxed better under Andy Lee. I thought, just boxing wise on the back foot, he did look a little bit more polished. And I just think he has a bit of a better work rate over the distance. And I think he's just got a better skill set. But like you say, it's one of those ones where is the winner in a better position than the loser? I don't necessarily think so. I think if Del Boy loses this, Daniel Dubois or a Derek Chisora looks at him as a big marketing opportunity and a decent payday. So he'll still get work out of it no matter what. And then for Joseph Parker, he's not one of those world champions that you look at and you can see him trying to rebuild back up to his status. He just feels like a guy that's just involved in the same level fights all the time. And it just doesn't feel like much ambition. But I like the move with Andy Lee. I like the stuff he's doing with Tyson Fury and David Nyika as well. He's a good New Zealand cruiserweight. So, yeah, I just think that Parker might have the edge once again.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think Parker, he really should win. I think for me with Parker, the issue is he just can't fight in the inside.
Yeah.
He'll just hold and wait for the ref to break it up. And obviously Chisora won't let him get away with that in this second fight. But yeah, I think hopefully Andy Lee's maybe just giving him something. That kind of more like the Kronk style, and going into this fight, just be a bit more aggressive, and hopefully just, I guess, when you're training, with like someone like Tyson Fury as well, surely that'll give you a bit of motivation to maybe just change it up. But yeah, we'll have to see. But yeah, the other fight we were talking about just there was Gongora and Richards, and I think it's a huge step up for Richards. So far, he's looked very good. Technically wise, he's pretty much dominated most fights, I feel. Good jab. He seems to have good power. However, he just doesn't seem to be knocking guys out. And I think that's the issue a lot of people have with him, and maybe why, I don't know, some people are a bit not entertained by him, because he is lasting 10, 12 rounds. And at the end of the day, fans want to see knockouts. It is good to see a good boxing fight, but it'd be good to see him knock out some guys. But Gongora is just another huge step up, and I think this is more of a 12 rounder, if I'm being honest, which will be a good fight, because Gongora is a very talented guy. I think he's like 32, 33 now, kind of fairly unknown. IBO super middleweight world champion, I believe. And from what I've seen from him, he looks good. He's got power. How do you think that one's going to go down, Jamie?
It's a really good fight. I really like it. It does have the potential, if Richards gets a hold of it, to be a bit of a sleeper, really, because Richards does have that in him sometimes. Like I say, he's more intent on being defense-minded than sometimes, hurting his opponent and taking him out. And that's probably his biggest criticism, is that sometimes his fights look a bit like sparring sessions, because it almost looks too easy for him in there. But I think he's a really good fighter. The lack of power for me might be a problem at times, but Gongora it's hard to know what level he's really at, but he's such an entertaining fighter. The Akhmedov knockout, the Pearson knockout. I actually remember a few years ago now, I can't remember when it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, but on a PBC card, he got put in against Ronald Mixon, and who was an undefeated
I think I remember
prospect. And that was kind of seen as like, it could be a slip up for either of them, and he knocked him out early. And I remember from then on sort of keeping an eye on him, and he's got this kind of wiry power that just looks unnatural, because looking at him, he doesn't look like
he doesn't look like it at all. Yeah.
No. And even the way he throws his shots and his technique and stuff, it's not necessarily explosive, but he just seems to have this kind of wiry power about him. And he's a really good fighter. I think he is, kind of around that world level, not necessarily elite, but it's a good fight for Richards. I do feel like if he can implement his game plan and be very safe, make it a bit boring, he can win this fight, because I think it reminds me a little bit of Sonny Edwards and Mefalani, where going into it, I felt like Mefalani was the more polished fighter, but the kind of difference in foot speed was a big issue for him. And I felt like Sonny Edwards could win that fight. I feel like here, Richard's foot speed, his hand speed can be a real problem from Gongora. But if he doesn't remain switched on, sometimes in fights when he finds it too easy, just looks like he's just sort of flowing. If he gets into that mode and gets too complacent, Gongora will just turn your lights out with one shot. So he has to be careful. I'm actually leaning towards Richards in this one, which is surprising, because I really like Gongora and really rate him. But I just feel like, from what I've seen of Richards, he's had a few wins as well that have aged really well. When he beat Lennox Clark then went and knocked out Willie Hutchinson, which was quite a big shock at the time. He won that fairly well. So yeah, maybe I'm sort of underplaying Gongora, but like I say, I really rate him, watched him for a long time, but I just think Richard's speed in his youth might give him an advantage here.
No, it'll be interesting. Definitely looking forward to that. And we've also got Lee McGregor fighting on the night. I can't remember who he's fighting. Do you remember, Jamie? I don't know.
I have got the card in front of me, so
so really excited to see him. Obviously, he's going to be fighting on DAZN with Matchroom now, and hopefully that sets up the fight and the rematch with Cash from Glasgow, where I'm from.
Yeah.
So that's the fight I'd love to see again. Obviously, I was kind of messaging Jamie before this and was saying I had Cash winning that fight over McGregor, but McGregor's obviously teamed up with Ben Davidson. He's training alongside likes of Josh Taylor, and you can definitely see the improvements in his style. He looks to be a bit more of a pressure fighter now, and yeah, I'm really excited to see how his career progresses. Do you think it's a good move for Lee moving over to Matchroom? Do you think that will set up the fights he wants at bantamweight?
Yeah, I should think so. I know Eddie Hearn won the purse bid for that, so I imagine that it's kind of linked with that, really.
Yeah.
Like you say, I thought Cash won the first one well enough as well for it to almost be controversial, really. I know I didn't think I saw a McGregor scorecard when I was on Twitter that night. So, but things have really turned in that tide. I was saying to you kind of offline that, you know, since then, McGregor's really improved. He's changed some things. He looks like he's, you know, a lot more polished. Whereas Cash Farouk has kind of taken a lot of these fights against some South Americans, some Mexicans, where it's gone the distance and he's had to work harder than he's needed to. He's been bashed up a little bit more than he's needed to as well. So going into this, McGregor's a little bit fresher, got a bit more momentum behind him. And it'll be an interesting fight because, like I say, I thought Cash won the first one. I thought he has a bit more ability to him as well, but that tide is kind of turning. But I think it's a good move for McGregor, and I think those two collision course early next year.
Yeah, I'm looking. I really hope it happens again, and hopefully it happens. And I'm sure they'll make the fight up in Scotland.
Do you think it'd be a big fight up there?
Well, I know obviously I know quite like guys up in the Scottish boxing scene up here, and yeah, the guys that came over from Edinburgh to support McGregor. I wasn't there that night, but yeah, there was like 2,000 or something came over to Glasgow for it. And yeah, I could definitely see the numbers big for it, but maybe I don't know with Matchroom. I feel like ever since kind of Ricky Burns kind of declined, they've not really got someone in the Scottish market, and I think they probably signed Cash maybe thinking that he could be the guy, but in actual fact, this move with McGregor could just help them get a market up here again. So I think it's a good move from Matchroom in that sense. But yeah, I think could it sell out one of the bigger venues? I'm not too sure, but you never know. You never know. But it would still be a huge fight. But I know for a fact the guys would come over from Edinburgh, and then obviously if it was to happen in Glasgow, in like the Hydro or something like that, and obviously, you know, everyone in Glasgow would support Cash. So yeah, I think it could be a really good fight, and I would definitely go to it. So yeah,
I'm not a Scotsman, but that sounds excited. Glasgow.
Yeah, so you can tell I'm really excited about that fight. But that's just because I know people that know Cash and stuff. So it's it'll be interesting to see what happens there.